This podcast is part of the Frederick Podcast Network. Learn more at listenfrederick.com.
Welcome back to Mental Health and Me. This is season 4, and I am so excited to be back in the studio. On my hiatus, I did some research and some thinking about what I wanted this next podcast episode to be about and where I wanted to go this season. And so one of the things I decided to do was to stretch myself. I often find that my creativity comes when I'm doing something unique, where I'm getting myself out of the mundane. And in January, so not all that long ago, I went on a helicopter tour. And you might say, well, what's so unique about that? People do that all the time. And that's true. But I did a particularly interesting type of helicopter tour where there was no door. So maybe some of you have done this before. I certainly had not. And when I knew that I was going to do this, several things kind of happened. The first one was that I had a lot of other stuff going on. And when I had a lot of other stuff going on, I didn't have time to think about this helicopter tour. I knew I was going to do it, but I was doing about 5,000 other things until I got there. And I didn't have any time to overthink that. So it wasn't until I'm literally walking out to the helicopter to get on that I'm looking at this little thing and I'm like, there's no door. What the heck? Like the lowest we will go once we are up high is 500 foot. So we're going to be 500 foot above everything and we have no door. Well, that's going to get kind of interesting. So I'm doing some self-talk here. I get in the helicopter tour and I get in the helicopter and as it's starting to go up, it's wiggling. If you've ever been in one of these things, they're not exactly smooth and you're kind of going up in the air a little bit. And I feel that feeling of kind of fear grip my chest. Like I wasn't terrified, but I could definitely feel the fear. So I'm in a situation where part of me wanted to just tell the guy, could you land and let me out? But I'm not going to do that. If you know me, it's not really my style. But I felt the fear. And I said, I'm going to do it anyway. So let's go. So as we're going up, it took me a bit, right? The thing is wiggling and you're kind of turning and I'm holding on even though I'm strapped in, but it's kind of an instinct to do. And I'm in these different situations. I'm looking at different things. The wind whips through. If you've ever been in an open door helicopter, you are getting blown like you're going to blow out. It's very intense wind. So I'm up there thinking, I'd like to enjoy myself. What do I have to do to enjoy myself here? This is feeling a little weird. And I really had to use that chance, that time, to get control of my mind. And I had to say, I'm going to make the choice to feel the fear, do it anyway, and then I'm going to enjoy the experience. So I'm going to add this other layer. I don't want to be miserable in this experience. So what do I have to do to enjoy it? So one of the things I did, I immediately began controlling my breathing and I did some self-talk. I reminded myself this is very safe. I eyeballed the pilot. He looked really legit. I know that's not really the gauge if whether he is legit, but he looked like he had done this for quite a while. So he didn't seem bothered. When the helicopter would wiggle or bounce, he seemed very content with all of that. And he was pointing out really interesting things. So I'm doing all this self-talk and we're going and we're kind of moving around, right? And I start feeling like, okay, I know this is a 2-hour experience, something like that. And we go around this mountain. So we're up here and you're seeing houses, you're seeing all this stuff. But then we go around the side of the mountain and it's like the most insanely beautiful thing ever. It's like you're on a deserted island, that there's no one else there. It's the beginning scene, really, of Jurassic Park. This was filmed in the same place. And so the fear that's sort of squeezing in my chest, squeezing at my heart, just explodes into the total opposite side of the coin, which is the joy. And as I'm just in this position where I can't stop smiling and one thing is more beautiful than the next, there's waterfalls and there's all this greenery and there's things that don't even look real and this untouched, preserved nature that we're diving through in a helicopter. Everyone's snapping pictures. It was just me, my husband, a travel companion of ours, and the pilot, and we're going through all of this and I just couldn't stop smiling. And I'm still getting blown like crazy from the wind. It's still super cold. It's still loud, but I'm able to just focus on the joy. And when I was up there, I even kind of thought to myself, if I want this extreme joy, if I want to have this intense happiness, then I'm going to have to do things that put me in a very uncomfortable position. So it took probably 45 minutes to an hour for me to stop like gripping the side of the seat when the guy would turn and I was kind of on my side, like I was going to fall out. That's kind of what you think. But it took me about 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, I definitely experienced a few uncomfortable times and I still worked through them. It wasn't linear, so it wasn't perfect, but I continued to go through and still find these things that were just incredible and made every experience up there worth it. In the beginning, I even felt a little nervous. Like we have our cell phone and it's kind of strapped to us. And I thought, I'm not going to take any pictures. But you know what? By the end of the experience, it was fine. So it took me 45 minutes to an hour to get, I was taking some pictures in there, but to get to the point where I was really comfortable, where I wasn't kind of holding on anymore, that took a bit. So when we're going through there, I don't know what my favorite part was. It was really, really incredible to pull up to these waterfalls, just like you were in Jurassic Park. And there's not a soul around. You can't see anything other than this untouched, untapped nature. But then we go to another area on the Napali coast. And the waves and the color of this water and the way that they hit the land didn't even look real. It's hard for me to, even when I look at my pictures, say, was that real? Is that actually what I saw? So I had this intense experience for 2 hours. And when I reflected on it later, I came up with some themes. And one of them was that the discomfort leaves at some point, and maybe it was totally not gone until I landed and we were back out of the helicopter, but the discomfort is gone. I don't consistently feel that, right? That was something that you dealt with at the time, but it leaves. But what I was left with was the pictures and the body sensation and the memories and the rush of adrenaline, and only the discomfort leaves. All the positives stay. So when we put ourselves in a position of stretching ourselves, of going and doing something unique, going and experiencing the world in the way most people don't, we're not going to be left with the hardships. We're going to be left with the extreme positives. I could have just gone to the Napali coast and walked along it like everybody else, but instead I had this experience that allowed me to come out with something that stretched me, that caused my travel experience to be more unique, or to stand out, or to hold on to me in a different way. So I look at those pictures and they give me something that I wouldn't have had if I'd have just done the experience like what most people do. I also thought about the privilege of constant comfort. And this is really a unique thing to the United States, particularly maybe in the last 150 years. But if you think about it, the privilege of constant comfort, it really prevents us from differentiating living and feeling really alive, right? So I could go all day and have the temperature at 70 degrees. And never leave that. I can always alter things to make me comfortable. In the car, when we're driving, if I'm in the house, wherever I'm at, I can alter the experience to pure comfort. And so when we get in the habit of only wanting comfort, what ends up happening is we're not really willing to leave that. We like to just kind of stay, and we hear the term comfort zone, but I want you to think about even things such as your temperature or the way your body feels. Are you willing to put yourself in an uncomfortable position to experience the extreme positive emotions that come with that discomfort? It's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for you to go out there and say, I'm not going to die. It's not really going to kill me, right? It's not going to be all that hard. So I just got to push through the discomfort. And then I have this really awesome experience for it. You know what else I wasn't doing or even thinking about when I was in that helicopter was social media. Every picture I took was for me. Everything I looked at, I just soaked it all in. I really didn't care what anybody else thought of my pictures or my experience. This was 100% for me. And when we are in these more intense places or in the more extreme, we are focused on ourselves. We're focused on the here and now. We're focused on that moment and on just soaking everything in that we can because we know it's temporary. You're never going to live in any extreme forever. So when you get those experiences with the extreme joy, you want to hold on to those. You really want to soak all that in. I also thought about my friend group. The reason we did this, my husband and I, was not because it was our idea. We had a friend who said, this is what you got to do when you go there. This is the way to do that. And I thought to myself, what's really important is to have a friend group where the people in it stretch you, where you are with friends who kind of pull you in different directions in the sense of there's more out there. I love that Imagine Dragons song. I'm just a symbol to remind you that there's more to see, right? You know that lyric really well. You're probably singing it now. But you want to have friends that sort of help you see things in a different way. There's only so much that you're going to find on social media. My friend who does this, I don't even think he posts pictures on social media. And it's kind of like this, I don't want to say secret, but I'm going to guess that if you Google it, you're just getting inundated with ads, right? So you want to have a friend group, or you want to consider doing things with people who do things that are different, who are out there kind of living life and who are pushing themselves. And that's a great way that you can support each other is if you have these kind of active friends and you help each other stretch yourselves. I noticed too how easily the smiles came when I was on this helicopter tour. That's something else that I thought, does that really happen every day? Like, how often do we smile like one of these giant smiles that we just can't wipe off our face if we had to? And I did that for like 2 hours. It was really awesome. And it's something I wanted to do more. I mean, I just couldn't stop smiling. And I thought, man, I need to smile more often. I need to have myself in positions that are just really more joyful and be able to find the joys. I mean, it's not always going to be a helicopter tour, but I did like the feeling of smiling. And it's something I wanted to focus on a little bit more is like, wow, how often do I smile like this? I thought to myself too, I'm a Christian, but even if you're not, I looked at these views and I thought, man, how can you not believe like in all of this nature, right? If I do believe that God created this, if I'm looking at that, then how can you not see yourself as part of this? I think that when we find nature and when we really appreciate it and really appreciate the world, it kind of elevates, right? Like we are part of that. Like we are also a creation that is just existing within this. And we're really quick to find the beauty in nature. We're a lot of times hard on ourselves. But I thought it was just a great way to just be grateful for who we are, that we are part of this massive circle of life. I know it sounds a little bit corny, but when you see this untouched nature, it is a privilege to just even get to witness it, I think. Hawaii, I've been there twice now, and I would say it's the perfect mix of like culture, relaxation, adventure. It's probably one of the few places I've ever been that let me get like this full circle of meeting my needs. But I also thought about how many people go to Hawaii. And something that's important to me is I don't like to travel like everybody else, right? I'm not the kind of person who's just going to sit on the beach with a drink. That drives my husband nuts, I think. He'd be happy if I was that person. But I'm like, okay, how many hikes can we get in? Like, how much can we do? And I really think that when you go to a place like that, for me, I want to come out with an experience that isn't like every other person I know who went. I want to come out and say, I did the experience that allowed me to get the most out of this trip, that allowed me to have my senses awoken, that allowed me to find new things about myself, that caused me growth, that caused me creativity. And so when you go on a trip, I'd encourage you to kind of bring those pieces in about what do you need to do that's unique for yourself. Maybe you want to do what other people did, but think outside of the box a little bit, stretch yourself, see what else can come along. And, I think to myself a little bit about this tour, and I will post a few pictures for you. And I don't even know what the most beautiful part was. It was just such an interesting way to see things. I also have an appreciation for that bird's eye view. We aren't birds. How privileged are we that we can get a chance to fly? Because that certainly hasn't been here forever. And so we're getting to see things from this aerial view. And I do think that puts so much in perspective for us. And it's always that reminder of if we can pull back. I'm sure these things look really pretty up close, but if you pull back and you get this aerial view and you see all the pieces together, right? You can see how it all kind of comes together, how it all plays out. And it's such a beautiful view. It's such a great way to see things. We need to do that in our lives. Sometimes we get really super focused on things, but boy, when you can pull back and have that aerial view, things sort of calm down a little bit. They sort of normalize a little bit and it becomes much more manageable. It's just a good reminder to kind of pull back and do that. I also thought to myself about kind of trusting the process. When we are an overthinker, which I tend to be, we talk ourselves out of a lot of things. And I was really proud that I didn't get the chance to overthink with this trip. And even when they buckle you in, you have these two little straps. And part of me is thinking, of course, I don't really have much time to think about it, but it's like, is this really going to hold me in? Is this really going to work out? And the rational part of me is like, kind of not real sure, but I didn't have the time to give the energy to that, right? I had to mentally prepare, listen to the pilot. Okay, you're kind of doing all this. So I want to also encourage you to be spontaneous, because what prevents us from doing things is not often the doing things. It's the getting started. It's the going there. It's the actual get in the car and go, or it's the setting a date and doing it. It's the overthinking that prevents us from actually making progress or from actually having these experiences. You're going to listen to this and you might think, I'd love to do that, but would you? Is this really something you'd want to do? And if it's not, that's totally fine. But I want to encourage you, if there's something you've been thinking about and saying, I'd love to do that, do it, right? Call in sick, walk out the door, do what you have to do to get these experiences for yourself, because we don't want to live the same 365 days this year and call it a life and call it a year. We want to have these extreme experiences that stand out, that push us out of the mundane. And so I would just like to challenge you. I don't know what it'll be, but come New Year's Eve, I want you to have your own version of the experience that I shared today. And I want you to simply do it. That's the hardest thing, is getting started, making the plan. There's many ways that we could get it accomplished, but we sometimes are our own worst enemies there. So think about what you'd like to do and then go for it. Thank you for tuning in today to Mental Health and Me, sponsored in part by the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. Until next time.
Live radio, local podcasts, the Frederick Podcast Network at listenfrederick.com.